And now it's time for another Dice Tower review with Mike Vincent.
Alright, another Doomed card, the Power of Orthanc. This is for Spirit, has a cost of 0, and reads Doom 2. Action, each player may choose and discard a condition attachment from play. So this is a card, in my opinion, that is well worth the Doomed cost. There's very few ways in this game, other than the Miner of the Iron Hills, who is an ally for lore, there's really no way to get rid of condition attachments. And there's been so many quests where my wife and I are playing and neither one of us are playing lore, and we get a condition attachment, and it's very frustrating. So I love that they've given us a way now to deal with condition attachments outside of the lore sphere. And so absolutely, some of those condition attachments are absolutely brutal. I would happily pay 2 threat to get rid of that. So this is a really good card, and I think an example of where the added threat is worth it. So thumbs up for Power of Orthanc. Okay, another Doomed card. Of course, now Tactics gets their turn. This is the Wizard's Voice. Again, has a cost of 0, so essentially instead of paying resources for these cards, you're playing with threat. Action reads, each player chooses one enemy engaged with him. Until the end of the phase, each chosen enemy cannot attack the player that chose it. So this is a nice card in the right situation. Of course, Doom 3, that's again getting high. It's past that sort of easy threshold of 1 or 2. 3 and 4 is a lot harder to swallow, but there are times where you get flooded with enemies. Sometimes when you're switching quest cards, when you go to the next stage of the quest, and perhaps you have to add more enemies and you already have enemies, and so this could definitely save your bacon in the right situation. So depending on the quest, this is not a card I think I would put in my deck to begin with, but if there was always a quest I was finding where we're getting overwhelmed by enemies, then perhaps this would be a nice addition. But Doom 3 is high, so I would be hesitant to play this card. But it seems to be with these Doomed cards, sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not. I think it really depends on the quest that you're playing. Now, it'll be interesting to see going forward. There might be more cards that will help mitigate Doomed, maybe can reduce the Doomed cost of cards, and so that might make these more playable in the future. But this is just the first we're seeing of this Doomed mechanic on player cards, and so it's something that will, I'm assuming, be further developed. And so for now, I'd be very hesitant to play this card unless I really needed to. So there you have the Wizard's Voice. All right, now a nice breath of fresh air. We actually get to look at some cards that don't make you raise your threat, which is nice. So for Tactics, we have the Brougham Warhorse. This has a cost of 1, is an attachment, and is a mount, and reads, attached to a Tactics or Rohan hero. This is restricted. Response, after attached hero participates in an attack that destroys an enemy, exhaust Rohan Warhorse to ready attached hero. So this card is fantastic. This game has some ways to ready heroes, but not a ton, and not so much with the Tactics sphere. So this was actually a card I was able to play with this morning, and this attached to Legolas with a Rivendell blade was amazing. Being able to attack with him twice a round and then get progress tokens every time I killed an enemy. So in some cases, Legolas with the Rivendell blade and the Rohan Warhorse was able to kill 2 enemies and each time get 2 progress. Really good. So I think this is a card absolutely worth including. It is unfortunate that it does count as a restricted slot. So normally I like to have Legolas with maybe another bow or 2 Rivendell blades. But the ability to ready him and have him attack twice is awesome. There are so many heroes that you could consider using this with. If you have Dun here, if he was really powered up with attack, then perhaps you could use this to have him kill 2 enemies in the staging area in a turn. There's so many options. So I think Rohan Warhorse is going to get a lot of play, and the good news is you don't have to raise your threat to play it. So thumbs up, Rohan Warhorse, really good. So our next Tactics card is the Westfold Outrider. This is an ally for Rohan and Scout, has a cost of 2 and has 0 willpower, 2 attack, 1 defense, and 2 hit points. Reads, action, discard Westfold Outrider to choose an enemy not engaged with you, engage the chosen enemy. So Westfold Outrider is okay. 2 attack, 2 hit points for 2 cost is decent. And certainly if you are playing a Rohan themed deck, then you have an ally who can attack with the Rohan keyword. Now, of course, discarding him is not ideal necessarily, but in the right situation, this actually combos quite nicely with Éomer. So you are going to have characters leave play to get the 2 extra attack for Éomer. So Westfold Outrider lets you drag an enemy into engagement with you. And we do know that some quests have those pesky enemies that can't be optionally engaged. So this would be one way to engage those enemies, and then it would give Éomer +2 attack, and hopefully he would be able to take care of it. Of course, Westfold Outrider will then be discarded, but if you're not discarding him and engaging enemies, then at least he can attack for 2 for a cost of 2. So I think Westfold Outrider is decent, pretty good, particularly if you're playing a Rohan deck, and there's only... When you consider the Rohan allies that leave play to trigger an ability, most of these tend to be Spirit. So there's not a whole lot of options here for tactics. So it's nice to have a tactics ally that will leave play. Of course, there's Eagles that do this. So you have that possibility to combo with Éomer. But yeah, having a Rohan ally that will leave play and trigger Éomer's +2 is very nice. So I think that's one combo worth considering. So moving on to Spirit, we have another ally, the Westfold Horse Breeder. Has a cost of 1, has 1 willpower, 0 attack, 0 defense, and 1 hit point. Again, has the Rohan keyword, and reads response: after Westfold Horse Breeder enters play, search the top 10 cards of your deck for a mount attachment and add it to your hand, shuffle your deck. So we are seeing some really nice mounts, mount attachments. So the Brougham Warhorse is great, of course Asphalot is a mount. We're starting to see more and more of them. So I think Westfold Horse Breeder could be a good addition. She's cheap for 1, you can quest with her, and of course you're basically guaranteeing yourself a mount. So as mounts become more prominent, I think Westfold Horse Breeder will become even more popular. Of course, you're going to have mounts in your deck, otherwise there's not much reason to include her. She does have the Rohan keyword, so that will synergize with some cards. But for a cost of 1, I think this is really reasonable and a nice way if you're really depending on having a mount function in your deck. If you're playing Spirit Tactics combo, then this will let you get the Brougham Warhorse out, or if you're playing Spirit Lore, then you can get Asphalot out, and of course there's one for Spirit as well. So yeah, this is a decent card assuming that you want mounts. So in a Rohan deck, probably going to come in handy. Okay, another Spirit card, we have the Silver Lamp. This is an attachment, has a cost of 2, and is an item. Reads: attached to a Spirit hero. While attached hero is ready, shadow cards dealt to enemies engaged with you are dealt face up. Shadow card effects are still resolved when resolving enemy attacks. So this is a very nice card, which I think could certainly come in handy with the right deck. A little bit restrictive here in that it has to be attached to a Spirit hero. You could potentially solve this through songs. And when attached hero is ready, so you have to have a ready hero. So perhaps a Spirit Glorfindel would be something to consider, especially with Light of Valinor attached. But then once your shadow cards hit the table, you're going to be able to see which one is which, assuming they're engaged with you. And so that's really going to allow you to decide who's going to block what. If you happen to have a lore hero with a Burning Brand, then that will be very convenient because you can take the nastiest shadow effect and allocate it to the Burning Brand defending character. Or if you have any heroes who are very low on hit points and a pesky shadow effect that would give +1 attack will kill them, well, this will help mitigate that. So I think this is good. Unfortunately, it doesn't apply to all heroes, both players, so this will not apply to your partner, and it is restricted to the Spirit Sphere. So oftentimes we associate tactics more with taking on enemies and killing them, but occasionally Spirit is going to have to do that, so this is a nice little security blanket for that. So I think in the right deck could be good. It's pretty reasonable at a cost of 2. Yeah, so Silver Lamp, the more you can do to find out which shadow cards there are and trying to deal with them, I think is worth doing. So there you have Silver Lamp. Another ally, this is for leadership. The Orthanc Guard has a cost of 2, 1 willpower, 0 attack, and 2 defense. Also has 2 hit points. Has the Isengard keyword and reads response: after you raise your threat from the doomed keyword, ready Orthanc Guard. So Orthanc Guard, I suppose, is going to be a defender. As your ability to ready him, his only stat really worth readying, I think, is for defense. But having only 2 defense and 2 hit points these days isn't really good. He would actually probably be lucky to survive 1 attack in order to take another one. And questing for 1 isn't overly significant. So considering you might be putting this guy into a doomed deck, but really a doomed deck is not going to be very viable. I think your threat would just go up too quickly. I think these doomed cards are more meant to be sprinkled into a deck here and there. Playing an entire deck themed around doomed would be really, I think, difficult and borderline suicidal. So The Orthanc Guard, not too big on this guy. I don't see really playing with him. Unless maybe you're playing a quest where a lot of the encounter cards have doomed, but then again, his stats don't seem to warrant him being readied. Perhaps it might have been better if they made this guy worth a bit more in terms of cost, but then made his stats a little better and worth readying. So yeah, I can't say I'm too big on Orthanc Guard. Yeah. Okay, and our last player card for Voice of Isengard is the Isengard of Messenger. This is a lore ally, has a cost of 2, and has 1 willpower, 0 attack, 1 defense, and 2 hit points. The Isengard Messenger, of course, has the keyword Isengard and reads response: after you raise your threat from the doomed keyword, Isengard Messenger gets +1 willpower to the end of the round. Limit twice per round. So again, like the Orthanc Guard, I don't know if I'm too big on this guy. Unless I was playing an encounter where I knew there was going to be lots of doomed keywords and I would be able to use this ability a lot, it might be worth doing. But again, I'm very hesitant to build an entire deck around the doomed keyword. So I don't know that I would really want to include this guy. His stats aren't very good. I think I will take a pass on Isengard Messenger. Now, of course, we might get really good cards later that come out that really combo with the Isengard keyword and maybe makes this amazing. But for now, I think Isengard Messenger is going to not be going into any of my decks. So there we go. Okay, so there you have my first impressions for the player cards for Voice of Isengard. For me, my top 3 would have to be Éomer, just a really good attacker. Nice to have another Rohan hero for building Rohan decks. Gives you some Rohan tactics action, and he's good. To be able to attack for 5 without any attachments, I think could be nice, and we already have Rohan allies who tend to leave play when their ability triggers, so that one's nice. The art's really good. I know Éomer is a popular figure as well, so I think this is a really good card for this expansion. For me, the Brougham Warhorse, having played with it this morning and already found it to be amazing, I really like this. I can see using this a lot, and I think this will get included very regularly in any Rohan or Tactics deck. Just being able to ready heroes and have them do 2 actions in a turn is great. So really high the Brougham Warhorse. And I have to give some love to the power of Orthanc. My wife and I have talked many times how we're always wanting more cards to get rid of condition attachments. And so finally, the Miner of the Iron Hills can take a little bit of a break, as the power of Orthanc lets each player, so in theory you could get rid of 2 for 2 threat, which I think is worth it. So these would be my top 3 cards. So as a buyer's guide, I really think the Voice of Isengard is going to appeal to veteran players, but I might actually advise newer players to take a pass on Voice of Isengard. If you're the type of player who has to have everything for this game, you want to buy every box expansion, and you really enjoy building creative decks and really playing with some of the more finer mechanics, then I think you're going to enjoy this, because I think it's kind of interesting to play around with the Doom mechanic, maybe give Grima a whirl and see, okay, how's this going to work? Experimenting with making decks with the Doom keyword and trying to mitigate it and see if you can make it work for you. But I think newer players might find this a bit frustrating, and I think it's not the most accessible. Are there any player cards here that are absolutely essential? I don't think so. I think a lot of these player cards are not cards that I'm going to put in my regular decks. They're ones that will be reserved for particular situations. Even a really good card like Saruman with the Doom 3, I think is going to be a turn-off to a lot of players. So if you only have so much money to spend in this game, then I might recommend some of the more accessible box expansions, Khazad-dûm, the Hobbits, the Black Riders. But if you really like this game and you really enjoy the deck building element and playing with fine mechanics, then I think Voice of Isengard actually is worth picking up, because it does have some interesting cards. So there you have my review for the Voice of Isengard, and stay tuned. There'll be more Lord of the Rings living card game content coming your way fairly soon. Have a great week.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.